Welcome to the Power of Transformation with Dr. BEGO, where faith meets declaration and purpose ignites breakthrough. Each episode empowers you to speak life, renew your mind, and walk boldly in who God says you are. Your transformation starts now. Well, good day, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Power of Transformation. I'm Dr. BEGO, and this is the day that the Lord has made. Today, we're going to be talking about emotional resilience. What does it mean to bounce back when everything seems to be pushing you down? Before we get started, a couple of things I would like for you to do. Make sure you follow, subscribe, and like on all social media platforms at Dr. BEGO Transform, and pick up the latest copy of my book, The 8 Declarations to Speak Over Your Life, anywhere where books are sold in both written and digital format. Are you ready to begin? Today we are discussing emotional resilience. But what exactly is emotional resilience? It's to bend and not break. It's to be pressed but not crushed. It means to rise again even after every setback that you experience. It's not about ignoring the pain, because the pain that you experience is real. The challenges that you face are real. Trauma that you had to go through and endure is real. Emotional resilience is your ability to refuse to be defined by your circumstance. And so whatever the trauma, whatever the pain, or the disappointment, or the grief, or the agony, despair, whatever the hurt that life has caused, you are not defined by what you've been through. Your name is not your pain. Your problem is not your purpose. And so emotional resilience means that you recognize whatever the challenge or circumstance or whatever the conflict is that you had to endure, you recognize it. It's real. But it also means that you don't allow it to dictate who you are, to determine your destiny and how you move forward with the purpose that God has for you. And so I want to spend some time today just unpacking how to build God-given strength, because we need it. Whether we are in the gym and we work out, we want to see results. Or whether we are jogging or walking the track each and every day, we want to see results. Or whether we have changed our eating lifestyle, we want to see results. Some of you have changed your dating pool and you want to see results. And it's the same thing as it relates to emotional resilience. And so emotional resilience really is the capacity to recover quickly from your difficulty. That whatever you have experienced, you know how to not wallow in the mess of it. Whatever the challenge is that you had to endure, you know how to get unstuck from it. And so emotional resilience needs to be grounded in this spiritual stamina. It's this inner strength that keeps you moving forward even as life is pushing against you. And so there are some examples that we find even in the biblical text. Paul and Silas sang and prayed although they were in prison. And they sung songs and they prayed until the circumstance changed. Job was holding on even in the midst of suffering. He declared, although they slay me, yet will I trust you. You remember the story of David, how David finds strength in God even in the midst of exile. And so these biblical scriptures help us to understand that emotional resilience is tied to spiritual stamina. That if you want to regain, keep, and be compelled in your composure, that your emotions are tied to the spirit. And so you need this spiritual stamina, this spiritual endurance, this spiritual strength in order to keep your emotions in check. And you do that by ensuring that you have faith over despair. You make sure that there's a connection between the emotional and the spiritual, so that over and over again, you put faith first. That although you do not see it, you still believe it. You believe in the promises that are discovered in God's word, and you begin to apply them to your life, even though you don't see the manifestation or the transformation or the outcome of it. It's like going to the gym, working out, looking in the mirror, and don't see the transformation. But somebody else who's on the outside of the gym, someone who you know, begins to look at you and ask you the question, what are you doing? Are you working out? Why? Because they see the change. They see the transformation that is taking place in you, which means you have to then go back and change your perspective. Change how you look at yourself, how you view yourself in order to see the transformation that is taking place. Now, I understand that to really begin to marry emotions and spiritual, we also have to recognize that there are some barriers to our resilience. There are barriers that are in our life that are designed to weaken us. And one of them is when we dwell in our failures too long. You spend too much time analyzing what was. You spend too much time dwelling on what no longer will be. Spend too much time analyzing what happened in your past. And so you long too long in the failures of the past. And everything is about if I woulda or shoulda or coulda. If you would have done this differently, then this outcome would have happened. If you would have said this rather than stating that, if you would have married this person and not this person, if you would have taken this job or this assignment or that promotion, then life for you would be different. Those are barriers because you're spending too much time in your past. Another thing is the isolation syndrome. That whenever life gets challenging or daunting, you decide that you can handle it by yourself. You retreat in isolation in an attempt to carry the burden alone. You say things like, I figured out all by myself. I don't need no one else. I can handle it. And God did not design us to operate in isolation. God created us to be engaged in community. And when we are in community, the barriers, the burdens that we have to carry, the load becomes lighter because we share in them. The other thing is you allow negative self-talk to dominate your inner voice. Oftentimes say that the mind is connected to the emotions and the emotions are connected to your behavior. And so whatever you allow to enter into your mind begins to determine your emotional response. And your emotional response begins to dictate your behavior. And so when you allow negatively to enter into your mind, you begin to replay it over and over again like a record. Something that's on repeat, constantly playing. And that negative self-talk begins to dominate your inner voice. And so rather than speaking those things that are positive, those things that are pure, those things that are uplifting, you become your own worst enemy because you tell yourself that you can't, or that you would never be, or never become, or never have, or never get over, or never be free, or never be blessed, or never be happy, or never experience joy, or never experience peace. And that is the inner voice, that self-talk that dominates you, that keeps you tied in bondage. And I believe also there are some who lack the spiritual grounding in God's word. There are some who can spend all their time in prayer and Bible study, in church, in choirs, in ushers. They are lovers of God and followers of Christ, but they lack the spiritual disciplines to ground them in the promises of God's word. So when these barriers take root, setbacks feel like permanent. Whenever you choose isolation, it feels permanent. Whenever you allow self-talk to dominate, it becomes feeling permanent. Whenever you lack spiritual grounding, it feels permanent. But with God, nothing is wasted. With God, not even your pain is wasted. Because with God, your pain becomes preparation in the process for you to live out the promise that God has for you. Can I say that again? With God, your pain puts you in a posture to move you through a process that prepares you for the promises that God has in store. Each and every one of us are in constant processes, journeys. We're traveling to meet the destiny that God has for us. And so I believe that in order to get there, to get to the state of self-actualization, there needs to be some building blocks for emotional resilience. The first thing I believe that you need to have is some perspective shifting. You know, Romans 8:28 reminds us that God works all things for our good. That's a perspective shift. That your pain, your problems, your predicaments, your precursors, your past, your trauma, your neglect, your disappointments, that God can take all of it and use it for your good. And I know what you're saying. You're asking me the question, how? How can God take my pain and use it for my good? How can God take what I had to go through and use it for my good? Because you begin to shift your lens from defeat to destiny. Remember, don't allow your past or your pain or your problem to define you. And so when you don't allow it to define you, you take control of it. Whenever it defines you, you are defeated. Whenever you control it, it plays into your destiny. It gives you a story. It gives you a song. It gives you a speak. It gives you a walk. It gives you a testimony. Take whatever it is that you have experienced and shift your perspective so that your defeat now is tied to your destiny. And you have to pray about it. You have to pray and you have to journal because you have to have the outlet to release the emotions. And can I tell you something? Emotions are something that ought to be embraced. Whatever the emotion is, fear, anger, anxiety, depression, you have to first recognize what it is in order to process your way through it. And so when you recognize it, then you pray, give to God, you journal, you write it down, you name the pain. Because whenever you name it, you weaken its power. You name whatever it is that came up against you. Because whatever you name, you control. You weaken its power and its influence over you. The other thing you need to do is make sure you have the proper support system. You know, Ecclesiastes teaches us that two are better than one. And so you have to begin to change your inner circle and ensure that those people who are close to you have your best interest in heart. That those people will speak truth even when it hurts. But those people will lift you even when it's heavy. That the people that you have close to you are people who love you and care for you and want the best for you. You need a proper support system. And then lastly, I believe that there needs to be some spiritual anchors in your life. Worship is so important. Not just dressing up, looking good, smelling good, feeling good, acting good, talking good, but worship. Because whenever you worship, you release all of that. When you worship God, when you enter into God's presence, you enter in naked. You are exposed. You find yourself vulnerable. And you're there in God's presence, not for God to reveal God's self to you, but for that God can reveal God's self in you. And so you need some spiritual anchors in your life, because resilience grows when you practice daily habits. So every day ought to be a day of worship. Every day ought to be a day of gratitude. Every day ought to be a day of thanksgiving. And so here are some daily practices that I believe can help you in this process. I think you ought to start each morning with a declaration of strength. Not one of misery or pain or sorrow or disappointment, but I think every morning ought to begin with a declaration of strength. Something like, I declare that I'm strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. You see, if you got to face some demons today, if you got to wake up and endure a negative or overbearing supervisor tomorrow, if you got to wrestle in spiritual warfare, even in your home, every day ought to begin with a declaration of strength. I declare that I am strong in the Lord and the power of his might. And just like you start every morning with a declaration, you ought to end each evening reflecting on God has sustained you from the day. You know, it's whenever you get home, whenever you get settled, you ought to just pause for a moment of gratitude. You ought to just say, Lord, thank you. Thank you for carrying me throughout this day. Lord, thank you. Thank you that I did not go off on my job today. Lord, thank you. Thank you that I got the strength to come home and take care of this family. That's a spirit of gratitude. Is when you pause for just a moment to give thanks. To say, God, even when I felt weak, you were there for me. Even when I fell down, even when I didn't do it right, even when I didn't dot every I and cross every T, God, I thank you because you covered me. And so you have to pause every evening in gratitude. But you got to also identify moments where God sustained you. Maybe God gave you peace in the middle of a stressful conversation. Maybe God provided clarity in your decisions. But maybe God simply gave you the ability to breathe, to pause, and to reflect. Whatever it is, you have to take moments to identify how God showed up in your life. And so you got to pause, show a presence of gratitude. But you got to identify the places where God did show up, even when it may not feel like it. And the last thing I think you ought to do is you ought to release the burdens of the day. You need to choose rest. You need to identify the space to cry. Now, what I tell people each and every day that I'm engaged in conversations, I tell people that when you get home, then you need to wash the day off. Somebody know what I'm talking about. When you get home, you need to wash the day off. Because whatever it is that you encountered in the world, you want to make sure that you don't pollute your home when you enter back in. So you get home and you release it. You let it go. You wash it off so that you don't contaminate the environment that is supposed to be one of peace, safety, and comfort. Here's another thing I think you ought to do. You ought to reframe setbacks as stepping stones. We all experience. We all go through. We all have our challenges and our disappointments. We all have pain and problems. We all have predicaments that we have to go through. So how do you take your setbacks and turn them into stepping stones so they don't turn out to be tombstones? Let me give you an example, like a job loss. Take your job loss and reframe it as a career redirection. You say, Pastor, how do I do that? A setback mindset says, I lost my job, my life is over. A stepping stone mindset says, this job loss is God's way of redirecting me into new opportunities. You see that? Well, one is a tombstone mindset. The other is a faith mindset. Take relationship breakups and turn them into personal growth. How do you do that, Pastor? You see, a tombstone mindset says that breakup proves that I'm not lovable. But a faith mindset says this breakup is teaching me that my worth is greater than what he or she could handle. Change your mindset, and you can do it from financial hardship to stewardship lessons, or health struggles to dependency on God, to failure in ministry, to reframing your calling in life. It is about changing your mindset, shifting your perspective. It is about simply knowing that whatever it is that you had to go through, that you have the ability to turn it and use it for your good. I want us to practice this declaration today. It simply says, I may be pressed, but I'm not crushed. I may be struck down, but I'm not destroyed. My strength comes from the Lord, and I will rise again. Are you ready to repeat that after me? Come on, let's say it. Repeat after me. I may be pressed, but I'm not crushed. I may be struck down, but I'm not destroyed. My strength comes from the Lord, and I will rise again. Let's say it one more time. I may be pressed, but I'm not crushed. I may be struck down, but I'm not destroyed. My strength comes from the Lord, and I will rise again. I want to pray for you today. I want to pray that you recognize that your strength is greater than your weakness. I want to pray that you rise above the failures and the falling that you may experience in life. I want to pray that you see beyond the pain and the circumstances that life has thrown your way. And I want to pray that you trust that God has the way of navigating through every storm that comes up against you in this life. I want you to recognize that your resilience, it begins to glorify God. And when you are resilient, it inspires others to trust in God. Because resilience is the mark of a transformed life. Believe me when I tell you that you may look in the mirror in your reflection and not see it, but best believe there are others who do. So keep on believing, keep on trusting, keep on enduring, keep practicing emotional resilience, because others are watching to see the transformation in your life. If this episode has encouraged you today, I want you to find 10 people, share this with them, that it might be a blessing in their lives as well. Keep practicing emotional resilience and watch the transformation take place. Until next time, may God bless you, may the Lord keep you, and may heaven continue to smile upon you. Peace. Thank you for tuning in to The Power of Transformation. If today's episode blessed you, share it with someone you love. Don't forget to subscribe and stay connected for more tools to declare, believe, and become. Until next time, keep speaking life.